Good afternoon to you all. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be with you in Dubai today. My task over the next 20 minutes is to talk to you about the way in which the working environment can contribute to wellness. I'm just trying to make the... Oops. So we heard this morning that there are many prerequisites that are needed for the criteria of happiness or wellness to be satisfied. We need health, we need security, we need education, of course. And happiness is a very, very elusive notion. We think about it all the time, we pursue it, we look for it, and yet it's very hard to define exactly what it is. So if I may, over the course of the next few minutes, I'm just going to begin with a short conceptual introduction of what it is. When we talk about happiness, we, in reality, talk about three different things. And when companies and organizations try to promote happiness within the company life, among the employees and workers, we talk about wellness, well-being, and happiness. Wellness, as it is defined by the World Health Organization, is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Well-being itself is being composed by three different dimensions, which are happiness, life satisfaction, and a sense of purpose, the feeling that we do something which is meaningful. And happiness, in turn, as it is defined by the Greater Good Science Center of Berkeley University, which is the most commonly accepted definition of happiness, is the experience of joy, contentment, and positive well-being, combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. So you can immediately sense that these three definitions are very closely intertwined, and it's hard to institute a conceptual boundary between the three of them. And well-being itself, which is the best proxy for happiness, is something that is not entirely clear either, because there are two notions of well-being that are in opposition to each other in some sense. When we talk about well-being, the pursuit of happiness, well-being as a proxy, there is the idea of hedonism, which is instant gratification, normally provided by material wealth, and then there is a more subtle definition of eudaimonia, well-being, which stems from something which is more profound. It's about relationships, personal development, and a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. This is what John was saying earlier. And we immediately sense that when we talk about hedonism, the pursuit of material wellness, there is immediately the sense that we may face a trap in terms of happiness, which is the hedonic treadmill. As we require a constant degree of happiness or satisfaction, we need more and more material wealth to reach the same level of happiness. So in a sense, it's like drug addiction, and we can immediately understand that companies or organizations that try to pursue the policy of maximizing happiness through material wealth are bound to fail because of this treadmill trap. So the key issue here is what is the relationship that exists between money and happiness. Some people claim that money does buy happiness, as it's shown in the cartoon. Others do not. Because of time, I will go straight to the resolution of this paradox, which is that money buys happiness, but only to a point. Again, this is something that John Clifton was alluding to earlier, and it's captured in the academic literature through the notion of the Ethylene Paradox, which in essence means that money buys happiness, but only up to a point. There is a threshold beyond which money, material wealth, generates decreasing returns, and even sometimes negative returns for very high level of material income, which again suggests that for organization companies pursuing a policy of maximization of happiness through material means only is bound to fail. When we talk about subjective well-being, if money is not what it is all about, then what is it? It comprises three main elements. One is a cognitive evaluation of one's life, the meaning that we give to our lives and the purpose that we find in it. The second one has to do with positive emotions, and the third one with negative emotions. And we have to understand that the pursuit of happiness is like a pendulum. We constantly oscillate between positive emotions, joy, pride, satisfaction, and negative emotions, which may be triggered by the environment in which we work, such as worry, anger, and pain. And again, when you look at the notion of happiness or subjective well-being through these lenses as a continuum, you realize that it's not a state of permanence. It's always something that is in a flux. Happiness moves back and forwards. And there has been a very interesting study conducted by a famous psychologist called Dan Gilbert, who wrote a book called The Science of Happiness and gave a TED Talk. And he compares these two cases. One is a man who became paraplegic after an accident, and the other one is a man who won the lottery. So immediately after the event itself, the level of happiness of the lottery man increases sharply, and the level of unhappiness of the man who becomes paraplegic increases as well sharply. So his happiness decreases. But then, when you measure the respective levels of happiness a year later, you realize that both men find themselves in a comparable situation in terms of how they evaluate their subjective well-being. So what is critical is to remember that for the purpose of policy, one should look at happiness through the lenses of subjective well-being. It's very much how we feel about ourselves and our relative position vis-à-vis others. Very often today, when companies or organizations talk about happiness, what they mean really is wellness. Today, you have an increasing number of companies around the world which promote wellness programs through physical activities or eat well programs put into place by the companies. And of course, wellness is very critical to well-being, but also well-being has some predictive power over wellness. Because, first of all, happier individuals are people who live longer, and there are many studies in medicine that corroborate the idea that happier people have better immune systems. So well-being, in a certain respect, contributes to wellness, but it's only a tiny dimension of what companies and organizations can do in pursuing happiness or wellness policies. So, who does what in terms of happiness? It's today something that is being pursued by many governments around the world. We all know about the Gross Happiness Index of Bhutan, which, by the way, is one of the most unwell countries in the world. So there is not always a linear relationship between wellness and happiness. The US, Canada, Italy, Dubai, of course, integrate the pursuit of happiness into some of the indices, policy indices. And there are also a very high number, an increasing number of local organizations and governments that use it for the purpose of policies in order to help people lead better lives. And of course, the same goes for companies with many programs of wellness at work that are currently being put into place in countries around the world. As an example amongst many, and you can go to the link if you wish, the UK government has just put into place an Action for Happiness, which is a 6-week course that has been endorsed by the Dalai Lama, and which leads people to live lives that are supposed to bring a greater degree of happiness. I use this example, of course, because I was trying to see what Dubai does. Dubai is very much at the epicenter of these policies pursuing happiness. And Sheikh Mohammed mentioned something that is really important, because we don't very often think about this in such terms, but being optimistic, being the glass as half full, is a key ingredient in terms of being able to be happier in a working environment. So when we look at the indices that measure the way in which happiness can be fulfilled in some countries vis-à-vis others, you realize that there are 6, and all of them can be transposed at the level of a company, of a business, or government organization, an institution that has workers and employees. GDP per capita can be transposed to income, salaries, and again, money is not everything, but having a decent salary is something that is absolutely essential in order to maintain a relative degree of happiness among your employees. Healthy years of life expectancy is equally critical, because if you work in an unhealthy environment, you are absolutely sure that you won't be able to lead a happy life. Social support manifests itself through the many different safety net schemes that can be put into place by businesses around the world. Perceived freedom to make life decisions is also important. We heard a gentleman earlier this morning mentioning the word flexibility. Whatever your level in the organization, if you're not allowed to make your own decisions, again, at whatever level you may be, it's very unlikely that you'll be in a position to be happy in your work environment. The other one is generosity. Well, generosity is something that can be expressed in many ways in a working environment. It can be compassion, it can be attention to others, and again, that's something that plays a very critical role in terms of deploying happiness within the organization. The 6th one is corruption. Perception of corruption plays a very critical role in terms of how the index of nation happiness is being measured. At the level of a company, it means that it's important to have a sense of pride vis-à-vis the organization that employs you. What are the working environment that are conducive to employees' happiness? There are many studies. Think tanks, research institutes, management consultants publish reports all the time about what is required to have a happy life within your working environment. So I've been trying to rank them in terms of the decreasing relevance by looking first at the big things and second at the smaller things. Among the big things, the critical ingredient, the most critical ingredient, is wellness programs. If a company doesn't pursue wellness program for the benefits of its employees, it's very unlikely that it will be in a position to increase the aggregate level of happiness in its workforce. Second one is provide feedback. We are all social animals, and the way in which we are considered by others plays a very critical role in terms of our sense of purpose. So it's critical that we receive feedback on a regular basis about what we do. Interestingly enough, many companies nowadays are starting to abandon appraisal systems. Appraisal systems can have a very toxic impact on employees' morale. But receiving feedback about the nature of your work, what you do, how you do it, is really important. Third element is flexibility. We heard about it earlier, having the ability to organize, to some extent, your working life is critical for happiness and satisfaction. Encourage exchange and conversation. Very, very important. Even gossips is important. We all tend to believe that gossip is bad. Well, in reality, you can refer to many academic papers that show that gossips, if it's contained, if it's limited to a reasonable level, it's something that enhances employees' productivity and contribute to a happier atmosphere at work, the ability to exchange with each other and share things. The last element is to get rid of toxic employees immediately. Toxic employees are the people who pollute their working environment but by having a negative attitude vis-à-vis their colleagues. And many companies, or several companies, procrastinate when having to make a decision about having to get rid of toxic employees. It's something that should be done immediately because these people, these individual behaviors pollute the entire working culture of an organization. And then you have smaller things that are equally important. We look at them in a smallish way because they're not big conceptual instruments, but they play a very critical role in terms of happiness in your working environment. Natural light is key. In Dubai, you are blessed with sun all year round, and we know that exposure to sun correlates with higher degree of happiness, particularly something which is particularly obvious in the countries that do not have sun for 6 months of the year. So having the ability to be exposed to natural light is important. And if you don't have natural light, try to have a well-lit environment. Clean and comfortable offices, of course, it sounds obvious, but it is not always the case, and that's important. If you don't have it, you cannot be happy at work. Plants play a big role. Studies have been performed by neuroscientists showing that when you put a plant in an office, it increases the relative degree of happiness of employees in this particular office. Ergonomics, of course, plays a very critical role because we heard earlier during the conversation on health that if you have backaches, etc., you are unlikely to be happy on a place where to relax and speak. I'm going to go through this slide very rapidly, but I just wanted to show you that some organizations, such as Harvard University, have been trying to measure the benefits that can be derived from investing in wellness programs. And it's shown to reduce a dollar spent on wellness by a company is shown to reduce medical costs by $3.27 and absentee day cost by $2.73. So there are very tangible benefits that can be derived from investing in wellness, subjective well-being, or happiness. And more companies in the US, Europe, Dubai are putting emphasis on employee well-being. Just as an example, 30% of Canadian companies have now wellness programs, and there is substantial evidence that this increase is being driven even further in some countries like the Netherlands, the UK, with double-digit increases in some cases. And many companies are putting into place some employee wellness month programs, and I was just giving an example of Virgin Health Miles, but there are, of course, many others. Apparently, the company in the world in which employees feel the happiest is Google. So if you look at what Google does in terms of fulfilling the expectations of its employees vis-à-vis happiness, it's four things, very simple. Free food, free gym and fitness, wellness, of which I was talking about earlier, free childcare for women employed by Google, and free shuttle buses. And it looks like, apart from the great positive effect of working for a reputable company, it seems that these four elements play a determining role in giving Google employees a higher level of happiness than would otherwise be the case. I will just finish with this slide because we mentioned earlier this morning the role of genetics. Could it be that some countries or people or ethnic groups have a predisposition to happiness? And yes, there is evidence of that. And there is a gene that has been identified, which is prevalent among Danes, the 5-HTTLPR gene, which is a gene that contributes to greater levels of happiness. So this gene exists, and it shows that some people can have a predisposition to happiness, but the good news, and that's something that needs to be remembered, is that we can all change our traits. And there is now an increasing number of articles in neuroscience, medicine, that show that through neuroplasticity and epigenetics, the ability to close or open the gene interaction and gene sequencing of our bodies, we can change our mind, train our mind, change our traits, and be happier. So I would like to end on this happy note. As one speaker said earlier this morning, it comes from our inner selves, and we can always improve the way in which we live happier lives. Thank you so much.